I think a lot of people know, and hopefully you know, he's a resident here in House District 2 and Senate District 32, a noted author and filmmaker and lecturer. And I think one of the great films he's made recently is what is it, U.S. Healthcare, The Good News?
Yeah.
Which is a great look at where things are working and how models that do work in the United States and where there's viability that other communities could learn from. And Tom has studied healthcare all around the world and can probably give us a good perspective on where the U.S. Stacks up or down compared to other industrialized democracies. And so T.R. Reid, our great
Thank you. I thank the sponsors. I want to thank Owen for doing all the work putting this together. Good job. I'm kind of an imposter here. I mean, here we have a table of healthcare experts, and I'm really not that. All I am is an ink-stained reporter who got interested in this topic. I just want to make that clear from the start. And I'll tell you how that happened. I was working in the Washington Post newsroom, which is a really exciting place to work. A lot of buzz, you know, and David Broder was working next to me. Pretty great people. A lot of good stuff there, but I didn't like it. And the reason I didn't like it was because the boss was right there over your shoulder at every minute. You never got very far from the boss. And a couple of times they would send me down to Congress to cover a story on the Hill, and it's only 2 miles from the Capitol to the Washington Post newsroom, but just that break made a huge difference, not having the boss there. So I was thinking, this is pretty good. It's better not to have the boss looking over my shoulder. I think I'll expand the distance a little. So I became a foreign correspondent and moved 10,000 miles from the boss. And this worked beautifully for my career. In fact, I developed a career rule, which I really recommend, which is basically never work within 8 time zones of the boss. This is the rule I followed. And it worked for me because they never bothered me. When I first got to East Asia, they called. And I found a really good way to deal with this. No matter what time of day they called me in Tokyo, in China, or Japan, no matter what time of day it was, I'd say, God, do you know what time it is here? You know, put them on the defensive right away. I always thought that was a good way to handle the boss. And of course the answer is no, they don't know what time it is there. Anybody here know what time it is in Beijing? I mean, people just don't know. So even if they called me at noon, I would say, what, are you trying to wake my kids? You know, and put them on the defensive. This worked fine. So we stayed overseas for about 16 years because we were liking it. And here's what happened. You know, a couple of my kids would get earaches. One of my daughters got measles. My son broke his shoulder at the Nozawa Onsen ski resort in Japan. And we started we had to go to the doctor's office. And we're Americans. And we knew, of course, that America's best at everything and that we had the best health care. And gee, are we bad parents for taking our kids to a Japanese doctor or a Chinese doctor? And here's what we found. We found very quickly, particularly in the rich countries we lived in, the care was fabulous. The facilities were great. The care absolutely was American standard. We didn't wait that long. And the striking thing was the bills. The bills were 1/5, 1/10, 1/20 what you would pay for the same procedure for the same ailment in the United States. In fact, in Japan, very often, I didn't even bother to send the bill home to the insurance company because the postage was more than the doctor bill. Really, this is true. And so, just as a reporter, I got interested in this. How do they do this? How can they provide this high-quality care at 1/5 of what we charge? And I went around the world to look at doctors in rich countries, and in the course of the reporting, I then discovered the most amazing, most striking fact of all, which is all the other countries like us, and I mean by that advanced, high-tech, free-market, capitalist democracies, all of them provide health care for everybody. All their citizens, all their aliens, anybody living there gets health care, and they do this out of a sense of a moral imperative. They're all convinced that a decent, wealthy, ethical, democratic society should provide health care for everybody. The only one that doesn't is the United States. We miss by a mile. According to the Census Bureau, in December of last year, 48.6 million people in America did not have health insurance. And if you don't have health insurance, it can be lethal. The National Academy of Sciences says About 25,000 of our fellow Americans die every year of treatable diseases because they can't afford a doctor. In the richest country in the world, we let that happen. And this is what Obamacare was all about. Its basic goal, look, it's huge, you know, it's 200,000 words. It's twice as long as my book, and I looked at the whole world in my book. It's huge, but its main goal was to expand coverage, to get more Americans with some form of health care coverage. And I don't know if you know the basic design, but the basic design of this was they aimed at getting 32 million more people insured who weren't insured when the bill was passed. Now, if you think about it, I just told you 48.6 million were uninsured. So Obamacare never really aimed at universal coverage, and that was because of political decisions. They decided to expand coverage primarily through for-profit private insurance companies, and all the economists agree that's the most expensive possible way to pay for people's health care. We did it that way for political reasons. That was what was deemed to be able to get through Congress. And if you look at the bill, it's not a government takeover of medicine. It's a huge boon to private insurance companies, private drug companies, private hospital companies. And I don't think there's any question about this. If the Affordable Care Act had been sent to Congress by a President McCain or a President Romney, all the Republicans would have voted for it. It's true. And many of the Democrats would have voted against it because it's too expensive, because it relies too much on the private sector. The basic plan of Obamacare for expansion of coverage is 16 million Americans were supposed to buy coverage from private insurance companies through the exchanges. And you get a subsidy if your family can't afford the premium. And then 16 million others were going to get insurance through Medicaid, which is the state and federal joint program. It's really 50 different programs to provide care for low-income people. And so even from the start, Obamacare was not designed to cover everybody. In my view, that was a shortcoming from the beginning. And as it turns out, partly because of the glitch in the rollout and partly because of other things, it now seems clear that it's not even going to get to the 32 million expansion that it was designed to achieve. The American Hospital Association, which really likes Obamacare because it's true, hospitals provide a lot of free care to people in our country who don't have insurance and are sick or hurt. They like this expansion. They think in the end of 2 years, Obamacare will get 20 million new people covered. And you know, the numbers that Lindy just gave us are really gratifying after 1 month to get 187,000, 200,000 more Coloradans covered. But according to HHS, last October, there were 840,000 Coloradans without health insurance. So we've only gotten a quarter of the problem solved. Are you with me? So I think Obamacare is definitely better than what we had. It's definitely better to get those people covered. It is not the answer. It doesn't get us where we ought to be and where all the other countries like us are, which is health care coverage for everyone who needs it. That's where a decent, ethical democracy ought to be. So, how are we going to get there? There are a couple of ways you could think about this. Was that 2 minutes? Yeah. A couple of ways to think about this. One is some kind of federal proposal would expand on Obamacare or change the terms. I think the most likely, frankly, is something called Medicare Part E. Have you heard of this? Yeah. So Medicare Part A, that covers hospitals, is that right? Medicare Part B covers your doctor visit. Medicare Part C is the term for these private insurance plans called Medicare Advantage. Medicare Part D covers drugs. Yeah. Medicare Part E is Medicare for everybody, which doesn't exist yet, but it would be a solution that would work, and Medicare is a very high efficient, low administrative cost provider. It gets doctors to provide care for lower fees than the private insurers. It would be a good solution. It may not be doable. Certainly it's not doable in the United States today. Maybe somebody could run for president on this and win and do it. I think it's more likely, yeah, more likely that we're gonna get to universal coverage state by state. And if you want to read a book about this, there's a book about this out there, it's in the bookstores, and it says that there were some countries that got to universal coverage in one province and it worked, and then it spread to the neighboring provinces and gradually spread to the whole country. This is an approach that can work, and you know, one state has gotten pretty close. Massachusetts is at a little over 98% of all its citizens are insured. They didn't get good cost control, but they've now passed a cost control measure. I don't think Massachusetts is going to be the model for the United States because it's Massachusetts. You know, it doesn't feel like us. But I do feel a good model for all Americans is Colorado. We are a totally normal state. And if Colorado could find a way, to get coverage for everybody, we could make it work just like we're going to make marijuana work. And how are we going to get there? Well, for that I turn to my colleagues on the panel.